NC Youth, what's up? Good to see you. Actually, I can't see you, but I hope you think it's good to see me. I miss you. We are praying for you. We are having a blast wherever we're at. None of your business. But it's time. It is time for the message. In fact, we're talking about God's perfect timing today. And you know what? I got a question for you. Have you ever had a moment in your life that things didn't go as planned? Like you had things set out, you had made plans for your life, you had hoped and dreamed, had this timeline for how things should go and how things should look, but it all fell apart. Things didn't go through as you planned. In fact, they fell through. And now you're feeling like, where is God in all this? You're devastated. You're even doubting whether God has a plan for your life. You know, you've heard that He's always had a plan for you. God's going to figure things out. Good things, come to those who wait. Timing. But nobody likes God's timing, see? We all have our agenda for our lives, our plans, but nobody likes God's timing. See, I don't want you to doubt the fact that God has put something inside of you, your heart, a plan, a dream, a goal. But you got to trust God's perfect timing, because He knows exactly when it is that you need to be fulfilling His plans for your life. I can relate to this, because I remember being engaged to my hyena, getting ready to get married here, making plans, and we made a decision. We said, you know what? Forget the honeymoon. We don't need to spend all kinds of money on a honeymoon. Why don't we buy a house? We're starting a life together. Let's buy a house. So we went out looking for a place to live, right? And we found a place. We found the perfect home for us. I mean, we started to dream about it. In fact, we saw it twice. Can we go look at that house one more time? We told the owner, this might just be the one for us. We're beginning to see our lives unfold there, how we would live there and where we would put things, and how we would just continue to fulfill our plans on our time. And the good news was, not only did we fall in love with the house, but the owner fell in love with us. He's like, okay, I'll sell it to you. There was one problem. We didn't have a loan. We went to the bank, and in the process of getting qualified for a loan, a few days later, we receive a call. I'm sorry, guys, but somebody else came, gave us an offer on the house. I couldn't refuse it, and now it's pending sale. We are devastated because we had started dreaming up our lives there. It would have been perfect. We would have been newlyweds. We would have purchased a house right after that. Like life would have been perfect. We went to church nearby. We were in children's ministry at that church. Everything would have been perfect. Perfect timing, right? Not God's timing. And it seemed like it fell through. It really did. We were X'd out of that deal. You know what? We were determined to get a house. We said, we're going to look around. We looked around. We looked online. We finally found a house that we thought would have been maybe decent enough to go look at, right? But our heart just wasn't there. We got to that house. It had everything you would need to start a life. It had a yard. It had enough rooms and space and all that kind of thing. It would have been just fine. It was in that same town. It was near church, but it just didn't feel right. And we left that house even feeling worse, really, until my grandmother, Angie's grandmother at the time, before I came into the family, she told her, if it's God's will, then it'll happen. It'll be fulfilled. Leave it in God's hands. If God meant for it to happen, it will happen. So we left that conversation thinking about that. And a few days later, we received a call. And this call was from the owner of the first house we wanted to buy. And I remember that day like it was yesterday, because what our grandmother had said, if it's God's will, it'll happen, it'll come through, actually was the truth. Because that owner of that house said, you know what? The other people that wanted the house after you, their deal fell through. They didn't get approved at the bank. And it was like a miracle, because we ended up purchasing that house. It was our first home. And hey, we lived happily ever after. We're still here. You know, life is different. But it was a great example of God's perfect timing. It wasn't his timing 2 weeks before then. And it wasn't his timing a year before then or a year after. It was his timing right then. And today I want to talk to you about God's perfect timing in regards to the story of Esther, and how God really stepped in and demonstrated his perfect timing even when she couldn't see it. Listen up, y'all. I have a tale to tell about a girl named Esther who refused to fail. She was chosen to be queen, but kept the Jewish roots, if you know what I mean. Oh, Esther in the Bible, she's a queen divine. She knew God's timing was perfect all the time. She stood up for her people, never gave up a fight. And with God on her side, she shines so bright. Esther was the queen of Persia, okay? She could have had anything she wanted, right? You know, timing wouldn't have been a question for her. Like, let me have it. I want it now. I'm the queen. Give it to me. Right? There's something about Esther's story that not a lot of people knew. At least only one person knew at that time. The secret was that she was a Jew. And the only person that knew was her cousin Mordecai. He was the only person that knew, because he was Jew too, right? That she was a Jew. And around that time, you know, you wouldn't see a whole lot of nations kind of intermarrying and kind of mixing that way. So that was a secret that would have got her killed. And around that time also, there was a law that was passed. And the people of Persia wanted to eliminate all the Jewish people. You see where I'm going with this? They wanted to kill all the Jewish people. And Mordecai is freaking out. He's talking to Esther. He's saying, look, we got to come up with a plan to save our people. Why don't you reveal your identity? You're the queen. Tell the king. You know, mind you, she's a queen amongst other queens. And this king got a whole lot of queens. Okay? And why don't you reveal your identity? Plead for our people. Our people are going to be wiped out. We need your help. So here Esther is about to risk her life. She waits some time, because it had to be timing, right? She couldn't just approach the king. She had to be called in, right? That's how it kind of worked. And she found her, or I should say, she didn't find. God opened the door to the perfect timing where she was able to talk to the king and convince him, reveal her identity. And through that story, the Jewish people were saved. And it's a beautiful example of God's perfect timing. But she had to take action. She had to take action, and she had to take a risk. See, you might not understand God's perfect timing, but when it is God's time, you got to take action. And you got to walk through that open door, even if it means taking a risk. I know you've heard this already. God has a plan for your life, right? Yeah, we've heard that all of our lives. God has a plan for your life, but he really does. He has a plan for you, just like he had a plan for Esther. In Esther 4:14, it says, and who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. God had a perfect plan for Esther's life, such a time as this. That's why she was in the role and the position she was in. For saving her people. And God has a plan for us as well. Even in those times where we doubt that plan. You got to understand what Esther's story really means here. But I'm sure that she doubted God's plan. Because if you know Esther's story, she didn't want to be there. She didn't want to be a queen. You would think she did, but she didn't. And we also sometimes don't really understand why we are in a position that we are. But we got to trust God's plan through it all in His timing. And through it all, He'll reveal the perfect time where we will understand what His plan is for our lives. So God has a plan for us. We need to trust Him in that plan. And God can use your circumstances for good. Come on. Listen up, y'all. Let me tell you a tale about a girl named Esther who refused to fail. She was chosen to be queen, but kept her Jewish roots, if you know what I mean. Oh, Esther in the Bible, she's a queen divine. She knew God's timing was perfect all the time. She stood up for her people, never gave up a fight. And with God on her side, she shines so bright. You see, Esther had it really bad. She had been taken from her homeland. She was forced to be a queen. She didn't want to marry a king that didn't care about her faith, a king that eventually would want to kill all her people. Like, she didn't want that. But even in difficult circumstances, we see God was working behind the scenes for Esther for His purposes. See, when you begin to align your heart with God, your plans, your timing, it lines up with His. And you begin to desire His plans for your life. And Esther is beginning to understand as her story goes on that, you know what? I'm in this circumstance. I'm yanked out of my homeland. I'm forced to marry this king. But God had a plan in all this. And His timing is coming into play in all this. And you may not understand, why has all of this stuff happened in my life? Why am I facing these circumstances? Why did this happen in my childhood? Why am I in this family? Why am I facing this heartbreak? Why? And God wants to use your circumstances. We got to trust Him in that. Trust that His timing is perfect. Trust that He has a plan for us. Trust that He wants to use our circumstances for something greater in our future, for such a time as this. So when you look at your circumstances, your mind begins to change. Like, okay, this must be for a reason. Can you say that? Can you say that in your heart? This must be for a reason. God has allowed this to happen. God has called me to such a time as this because God's timing is perfect. And Esther, she could have been queen before then or even after then, but God had chosen her to be there at that exact time to save His people. See, and God worked it out when her people needed salvation, needed her most. And it's kind of a picture of God. Esther was there at the right time, and God's timing is perfect. God's timing is always the best, always on time, always right. If Esther would have been queen any other time, her people wouldn't have been saved. But God's timing is perfect. Understand that. Now we need to trust that God has a plan for us. He'll use our circumstances for good, even the hardest ones. In Romans 8:28, it says this: we know that in everything God works for the good of those who love Him. They are the people He called because that was his plan. All things are going to work for the people who love God because they are his people, because he has a plan. He's called you. He's called you to your future, and he knows exactly where you are, and he wants to use that struggle you're going through, mental health. He wants to use that doubt you have in your life about your plan, God's plans and his purposes for you. He wants to use that trauma that you've gone through, that hurt that you're carrying. He wants to use that and turn it around for good. See, little did I know that God would use all the brokenness in my life to help reach young people who are struggling in many of the same areas that I struggled in. I didn't understand it back then. God has always had a plan, and he's willing to use our circumstances, but we have to trust his perfect timing. Hey! Here we go. Get ready. Ready? Are you ready? Here we go now. Oh, listen up now. I got a tale to tell about a girl named Esther who refused to fail. She was chosen to be queen, but kept her Jewish roots, if you know what I mean. Oh, Esther in the Bible is a queen divine. She knew God's timing was perfect all the time. She stood up for her people, never gave up the fight. And with God on her side, she shone so bright. Guys, I will leave you with that today. Trust God's perfect timing in any circumstance you're facing, and you will see that God will see you through. God bless you. I love you. Let's break out to the next part of tonight's order.